Greetings viewers, if you click the video link, you're here to listen to me talk about revolvers versus super fancy semi-automatic pistols. And do revolvers still have a place in the world, basically, or are they kind of obsolete and people just keep them around for more of a nostalgia factor, or just because they like the mechanical workings of it, or do they have some sort of deep-seated purpose that some of us just don't know about? So let's go ahead and talk about it. We'll do kind of a compare and contrast and maybe look at some of the pros and cons for each. So right off the bat, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is capacity. Obviously, revolvers are limited when it comes to capacity. Depending on what caliber you're rocking, you can get 6, 8, 10 shots into a revolver. The smaller the round, the more you can fit in the cylinder, but that's it. Then you're gonna have to stop and reload again. So, I mean, automatically that just stops the debate right there, right? So you get in a gunfight with a 6-shooter and you're outgunned with a guy with a Glock 17 that has 17 rounds in the mag, so that means you've already lost, right? So in that instance, this is where the shot placement crowd comes in, and you'll get the guys that are like, well, I only need 6 rounds and I can take out 6 guys with it, and well, you know, if your skill level allows you to do that, then great, keep practicing with that revolver and do what you do. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. But for the rest of us mere mortals, 6 rounds in this particular pistol that I'm holding, and then up to 8 even in some of them, is that enough? The other direct, obvious comparison between semi-autos and revolvers is reloading is not as fast. So unless your name is Jerry Michalik, then chances are that you're like the rest of us, and it would take you some time to dump the rounds out of the gun and empty it and reload it and put it back on target and get ready to shoot again. Those would be the first 2 things that immediately come to my mind, and I would imagine most other people's minds when you are comparing semi-autos and revolvers, is just capacity and reload speed. If we just stop there and looking at the negatives, then we wouldn't see any of the positives, right? I mean, they're both handguns. They both fire ammunition. You pull the trigger, a round comes out, and revolvers have been killing people for just as long as semi-automatics have, regardless of the caliber that is in them. So so let's go ahead and put a point in the pro side for the revolver. Right off the bat, reliability. When I pull the trigger on this thing, it's gonna go bang. When it comes to semi-automatics, there are way more moving parts and systems involved in the function of this firearm when you pull the trigger, making it go bang, that can have potential issues versus a revolver. So what do I mean by that? Well, for a semi-automatic pistol, the pistol can be fine. You can have it absolutely running flawless, but the magazine that you put in isn't great, or the ammunition that you chose is underpowered or has some sort of defect in it, or you didn't put the magazine in all the way, or you know, looking at the function of the gun, then some of your springs are wearing out, or your parts, or something is wrong. You've got some dirt and grime and grit in a place that it is just hanging things up and it's not functioning and causing you issues. If your revolver has a malfunction to the point where you're pulling the trigger and nothing's happening, it's not going bang, it's not doing what you want it to do, something is typically catastrophically wrong with your revolver, and you're not going to do an immediate action drill and fix it in the field. So I guess that could technically be a con as well, that if your gun does go down, that it's down and you might as well just start swinging it around and trying to pistol whip somebody, because that's about all it's going to be good for at that point. For the most part, revolvers, I have never had a malfunction with a revolver. And if a round goes bad or something as bad with the ammunition, you just pull the trigger again and it keeps going. There is no need to do a immediate action drill. That's all there is to it. You just keep pulling the trigger and until it doesn't go bang, you reload it, and then you continue the process. So again, reliability, these things, you can just throw some rounds in it. You don't have to worry. People argue about leaving magazines loaded and the pressure on the springs, and should you leave them loaded for long periods of time, or is it worse to load and unload constantly on the springs, and that's where your issues are going to come from. I can throw 6 rounds in this thing and leave it in a drawer for 20 years, and the only thing I'm going to have to worry about is the powder inside the ammunition, if it got wet or not, and it's not going to work. So it definitely would not be the gun's fault. So again, reliability, I would give 100% in the corner to a revolver. Also, the revolver can shoot in places that a semi-automatic may not, and that may kind of not make sense when I'm originally saying it, but if you just stick with me here, I'll explain. So, have you ever seen an armored truck drive by and you see these little kind of weird port-looking things on the side of it? Well, those were originally designed as shooting ports, so if the drivers were inside and they were needing to shoot out of it, they were able to push the barrel of that weapon into the port and fire the gun without there being any issues. That's why previously, the majority of the armored car guys were carrying revolvers for that specific purpose. I've noticed a lot of them lately have been carrying semi-autos. I don't think that too many of them are shooting out of those gun ports these days. So it's just kind of a sign of the times and advances in technology and thinking, and getting a weapon again that has more capacity and is a little bit quicker to reload if needed. You can put that again into places that the semi-auto wouldn't have issues. If you were to take a semi-automatic pistol and try and fire it through one of those ports, you'd probably get a round off, and depending on how you were orienting the weapon in there, the slide's going to catch or bang into the side of the truck, and it's going to induce a malfunction. Same thing, again, if you are, let's just say you're in a hands-on fight with somebody, and it's life or death, and you're needing to end the fight quickly, we'll say, and you need to make a contact shot where you are actually placing the barrel up against your target prior to pulling the trigger. I can press this as hard as I want and lay on top of it. I could even do a push-up on top of this, just balancing on the barrel, and pull the trigger, and this thing is going to fire without any issue. When it comes to a semi-automatic pistol, trying that same thing, if you are jamming the barrel into anything with even a modest amount of force, you can push the slide out of battery and you are going to induce a malfunction. Your gun is not going to fire. Yes, there are easy ways to fix that. You can put your thumb on the back of the slide and you can pull the trigger, but now you only had one round go off and you now have a dead gun. In the event that you need any follow-up shots, you're going to have to fix that malfunction. Again, when it comes to the revolver, all I have to do is just continue to pull the trigger until it stops firing. Same thing as well, if you will. If we were to carry a revolver in a jacket pocket without even a holster, and we just carried it in there and something went down and a situation arose where you needed to fire your gun, you could, without having to draw it out of your pocket, you can actually fire your weapon in your pocket and again continue to pull the trigger without inducing a malfunction, which you cannot say the same thing for the semi-auto. If you have a small enough one in your pocket, potentially maybe you could get a couple rounds off, but chances are higher than not that you would again induce some sort of malfunction. So I've heard all sorts of reasons and explanations of why people carry their guns in a certain orientation. I've heard people say that they carry appendix because if they're in a bank and it gets robbed and they tell everybody get down and you lay on your stomach, your gun is more concealed and it's hidden and it's less likely to be shown than small of the back where your shirt's going to come up and someone's going to see it. I've heard people say, you know, bad guy approaches you from the front with a gun, I'm going to reach to my back to grab my wallet, but haha, joke's on you, I'm grabbing my gun instead. Well, that kind of eliminates that the need for either of those. If I can just have a revolver, probably not this one, but maybe something like a smaller 38, such as the one here, but with a shorter barrel, a little snub-nosed pistol in a pocket of a jacket, you can walk around with that and something happens, guess what? Your gun doesn't even have to come out and you can fire it, and reliably so, just continue again, pulling that trigger until it stops. Whereas with a semi-automatic pistol, even a smaller one, after if not one round, but maybe even a couple, you're going to probably run into some sort of an issue. All right, so for this next little demonstration / experiment, I do not own any jacket with side pockets that are large enough to accommodate this specific revolver, but I did manage to find a hoodie that had a large enough pocket so that we could do a little comparison here. So in order to do a fair comparison, what we're going to do is we're going to be shooting out of the pocket of this hoodie here with our Smith & Wesson Governor, and then to be as fair and balanced as possible, we're going to be comparing it with a Glock 43, which, so if we are comparing these two for size, the Glock 43 is significantly smaller, so it doesn't get much better for a pocket gun to do this experiment with, so we can use a semi-auto. So let's go ahead and get set up. We're not really worried about accuracy. This is an old target I used from a previous video, but we're going to go ahead and get set up. I got 6 rounds that we're going to shoot out of each of these, or attempt to, and we're going to see how that goes. All right, so we're all loaded up and we're ready to go. I've got the camera pointed at me. Again, the target really is irrelevant at this point. We're just going to look at the technique and how this is going to go. Obviously, you may think of this as pretty unrealistic. Perhaps I wouldn't go walking around the mall all day like this. However, if you're maybe taking a quick trip to the mailbox or you're a quick walk with the dog outside and you just want to grab something real quick, you've got a hoodie on, it's a little cold outside, this is not that unrealistic. Again, there's no sort of retention or anything, and letting this hang, yes, it is going to be very heavy and floppy and noticeable, so not recommended for everyday use. This is, again, just a demonstration for something that is possible, again, comparing semi-automatics with revolvers. So we are loaded up with 6 rounds of 45 ACP, and we're going to shoot through the pocket. So let's stop talking about it and get to it. So obviously we had a little bit of penetration there, which is fine. The first round or two is going to end up doing that. I have a feeling that the jacket is not as valuable as my life might be if I were needed to do this in a realistic scenario. So we've got our 6 rounds of 9mm loaded into the Glock 43. We're gonna do the same thing. Since we now have a hole on this side, we're gonna go ahead and do this lefty. So that way again, so we're gonna be shooting from the opposite side so that there's not gonna be an issue with that. The slide doesn't penetrate through and then it doesn't do exactly what I'm thinking is gonna happen. I have been wrong once before, so here's the Glock 43, 6 rounds of 9mm, maybe. No, look at that. Once the first round punched through, it actually worked, so myth busted maybe? Only other problem with that is the hot brass in there on my hand. Didn't feel very good. But it's got a built-in brass catcher, so there's an option, but now we have some holes in here, so I don't think this sweatshirt's gonna be ready for everyday carry. So in this instance, I was proven wrong. However, it is a Glock pistol, so you know they're basically the best in the whole world, so they're never gonna fail. But anyway, once that first round punched through, then it was just kind of over from there. It had a hole to let the slide go through, and it actually cycled. I was surprised. I figured if that did happen that it would get hung up on the material, but it just kept on running. Again, Glock performance. So one thing that most modern revolvers, and I'm not saying all of them have this, there are definitely ones out there that break the mold, but most of them do not have any sort of rail on the front if you like to run a tack light on your gun, or any sort of optics mounting solution on top. Again, there are revolvers that do have that. I would absolutely love to get my hands on a Smith & Wesson Performance Center TRR-8. It's an 8-shot 357 Magnum revolver. It has the option for putting tack lights on it and optics on the top. I absolutely love that gun and I would love to own one, but the problem is trying to find one and finding one for a reasonable price. Anyway, that's not what you're here to listen to me talk about. So anyway, usually they're fairly simple. They have a iron sight with built-in notches in the back. This is not, there's no replaceable rear sight on this specific gun. Again, there are options where that isn't, where you do have adjustable sights. They're removable, they're replaceable. Every brand is going to be different, but for the most part, the standard is fixed rear notch and a front sight post, whether it's a night sight or not, fiber optic, whatever flavor. So looking at another, we'll say positive for revolvers is the ammunition type that you can utilize in your weapon. You do have your selections that shoot 9mm, 45 ACP. You can get revolvers that do that. Standard 357, 38, not a big deal. Those two calibers are not typically semi-auto friendly. And then you have things like 44 Magnum, 460, 500 Magnum. You're not going to fit those in a semi-automatic pistol. The Desert Eagle tries, but not quite on the 50 cal there. And yes, I am aware. So for those of you that are already jumping into the comments to tell me that 44 Auto Mag exists, yes, I'm aware. But we're talking about standard calibers that you can go into just about any local gun store and ask for, and they'll typically have it in stock and for a reasonable price. You do have the option of having a lot larger caliber weapons, so such as this 44 Magnum behind me. If I was in an area where I was concerned about bears or other large animals, I would probably stick with something like that, that I would know that is going to take down a large predator very quickly, and or at least make him rethink his life decisions in terms of looking at me as a giant snack. So one good thing that I really like about revolvers is they're great for teaching new shooters as well as practicing your skills, especially when it comes to trigger pull, which a lot of people, including myself, we struggle with or have issues with. So with the ease of just popping open the cylinder and being able to decide what round goes where, dummy rounds are an excellent option when it comes to practicing. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll probably do a video in the future on it going over dummy rounds and just some good uses for them. But it's very easy to just pop some in here. Which ones are going to be live or which ones are going to be dummy rounds. Usually what I'll do is I'll mix them all together and I won't look, and I'll just, without looking, just start grabbing rounds and loading them in there. I don't know what order they're in. Or you could have somebody else load your gun for you and then you practice shooting. And probably the biggest issue that most people have when shooting is flinching and squeezing the trigger, squeezing. You feel like it's going to go off, and then you do this and it was a dummy round and you catch yourself. Then just wondering why your rounds are low on the target. So it's a great way to catch yourself on that. Also working on that smooth trigger pull, getting your sights lined up on your target, holding it in place, and just slowly pulling that trigger and squeezing and focusing. It's going to help you work on your trigger pull. I promise. If you have a revolver, you have access to one, you can borrow one from somebody, try it, especially if you've never shot one before. Yeah, it's a lot heavier and harder of a trigger pull, but again, it's going to help you kind of see the issues in areas where you may be struggling when it comes to that department. You switch back to semi-auto and I guarantee you your trigger pull is going to be a lot better. So am I telling you that you need to go run out to the store right now and buy yourself a revolver because it's the best thing ever? No, I'm just kind of pointing out some things that may be overlooked or people don't think about or haven't thought of or shared. They just look at the negatives, capacity and reload speed, and they just give it a big thumbs down and keep moving and then tell everybody else that. And now somebody that may not be a gun enthusiast or, you know, big into the shooting world is now using that knowledge that they've heard from somebody else and taking that as gospel and not even giving revolvers a chance. So I just wanted to put the word out there that they still have a place. This particular one right here is one that I carry on my hip when I go around my property, and I'm going to do a future video on this, so stay tuned for that. This is the Smith & Wesson Governor, so if you're interested in learning about it, stay tuned for that video in the future. But anyway, thanks for your time. Hopefully you found something entertaining, educational, useful in this video. If you feel like I've missed anything or there's something that I could have added to get the word out and educate people a little bit more, leave me a comment down below. And I always try and get back to people and respond and make sure that your voice is heard and you're not just commenting to empty space. So with that, I am going to call the video here. Thanks for your time, and I hope you have a great day.